Hey there, it's John from Heroes and Legends, and this is part 6 of our 6-part Magic Origins set review. So this will be the final chapter. If you missed the first 5, we looked at each of the colors in color order over the last 5 days. You can check those out on the channel. But today we're looking at all the rest of the set, the gold cards and the colorless. So just want to take a moment to say thank you to all the new subscribers that joined us during the Magic Origins spoilers and set review season. Really appreciate your support. Glad to have you aboard the channel. Thank you, and we look forward to your continued support. So having said that, let's go ahead and start looking at these cards. And the first one is Blazing Hellhound. Very economical card for 4. You get a 4/3. If you're in those colors, that's going to be great for you in limited. And on top of that, it's a sack element. So if you're playing Act of Treasons, they just get that much better. If you're in a situation where your creature is going to die, you get a little value out of it. This is a very fine card. Blood Curse Knight. This will do work for you, especially if you have an enchantment. And if he has the enchantment, it can maybe do a lot of work if you got an aura on him. But yeah, 3/2 for 3 is just fine and limited. But then you get a +1/+1 and lifelink bump when there's enchantment in play. That's pretty cool. Bounding Crisis. Another great limited card, just a lot of value here. You pay 3 for a 3/3. It can be flashed into play as a combat trick, and when it comes into play, it can tap or untap a creature to further the combat trick. Very good card and limited. Citadel Castellan. And the theme of this entire cycle just seems to be value. Another good limited card. You pay 3 for a 2/3, and this one's got Vigilance and Renown. It's going to do some work for you. Iroa's Champion. This time you're paying 3 for a 2/2 double strike. Of course, this gets better if you have some good equipment, or maybe you have some auras to put on it. If you're in white, that could be very plausible. Very good card, another high value card. Possessed Scav, 5 for a 3/2. Now these stats don't sound quite as impressive, but it does have a pretty good ability on it. You get to take an instant sorcerer creature card from your graveyard to your hand when he comes into play. Now if he dies, you have to exile it, so you can't pull any zombie reanimation strategies to kind of abuse that ability. But I think it's still good, even though the stats are a little lower. I just like the fact that it's kind of like a hyped up Gravedigger. It could be a good card in limited. Reclusive Artificer. So this is perfect for the artifact deck with Thopter tokens. It's going to do some work for you there. It's going to come into play, hopefully destroy a pretty sizable creature that your opponent controls. But even if it takes out a small creature, it's still value, and it has haste, so you can get in right when it comes into play. So it feels more like it feels more like a turn 3 play than a turn 4 play. Shaman of the Pack. This one might be the best of the bunch. This one could see some standard play. This one could see some modern play. Elf decks have been very good in Modern recently. This is just a huge compliment to it. Only costs 3 for a 3/2, and your opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. That could be a finisher in the Modern deck. There's a very good chance a card like this will help elves become a standard deck. Elves could be a big thing coming up this summer or so in a lot of formats. It's also going to be great in that elf deck and Commander. And as far as limited goes, it's still got some good stats. I'd still play this even if I didn't have a lot of elves. It's still a decent card, but obviously the more elves you have, the better it is. Thunderclap Wyvern. This one's interesting. Costs 4 for a 2/3. It has flash, so it's kind of a quasi-combat trick. But it's a flying lord, so it gives all your other flyers +1/+1. So if you have a lot of flyers, or even a few flyers, there's some value there. Dragons of Tarkir have a lot of good flyers in it. Don't know if this necessarily is going to help them that much in the standard environment. For the 4 spot in standards, you probably have better things you could be doing, so I don't really see it crossing over there. But it's still going to be a really great card in limited. Zendikar Incarnate, and this one in some ways might be my least favorite. It can become very powerful, and it can really kind of maybe be a quasi-removal spell for a creature or two. Your opponent's going to want to get rid of this, so they may block it with 2/2s, and you might get some value out of it, but it is easily blocked if it doesn't have some sort of evasion. Now, there are cards that could give it things like trample and stuff, and then, of course, it gets much better, and then it's definitely worth playing. But I think in most cases, it's still going to make your cut. It's just because it has to be dealt with. It might not be quite as exciting as some of the other cards that we've seen, but I think it's still good and limited. Alchemist Vial. I like the fact you draw a card off this, so you're getting some value there. It doesn't feel like you've completely wasted your draw. I don't know. I know it's a Renown enabler, and I guess that's good if you had a lot of Renown in your deck and limited. But this card doesn't do a whole lot for me. It seems a little too situational for it to be good in most cases. Elhemeret's Archive. And this is going to be a great commander card. So basically, you get to double your life gain. You get to draw an extra card after your first card for the turn every time you draw a card. So this is going to be just fun in commander. You're going to see it played there. At the 5 casting cost, I don't really think it's going to cross over into anything else. And you'll still play this in limited as long as you have maybe a lot of cantrips, some card draw spells in your deck, or some life gain like lifelink. But if you don't have those things, you'll skip it in limited. Angel's Tomb. This is an okay card. It only costs 3, so you're not investing too much in it, and it's colorless. It's not always going to be effective for you, but having a creature enter the battlefield and getting a 3/3 flyer for the turn is probably good enough in limited. Bonded Construct. This probably isn't as bad as it looks. It's a decent blocker. It's going to help you with your early part of your curve if you don't have anything else that's better. And if you're playing the artifact strategy, there are cards that do make this one better. So know your deck. It's not going to fit into every limited deck, but it's not the worst card printed. Brawler's Plate. This one is kind of expensive equipment, but it is equipment if you need it. So, I mean, paying 3 and then 4 to equip to get 2/2 and trample doesn't feel super exciting, but giving some of these big creatures that don't have evasion trample could be really good for you. And there are some creatures that are going to do well with the +2/+2 buff, like some of the double strikers we've seen. So there are creatures where this will kind of combo well with. If you have one of those, it will be fine to play maybe one of these in limited. If you don't have creatures that are really going to benefit from this, if you're playing more of maybe like an evasion strategy, this probably won't be quite as good for you. It's just better to play another creature. Chief of the Foundry. So if you have a lot of artifact creatures, this is going to be good for you. If you don't, obviously you're going to skip it, but this is going to be fantastic in that Thopter strategy and limited. It could be really cool. I don't know. I can't think of really a place for this in standard, at least right now. But who knows what the future holds. I know Zendikar could have some decent artifacts, but there's also more sets coming after that. So this could see a home at some point in a constructed format, but for right now, I think it's just a limited card. As far as Commander goes, I could see this getting a little bit of Commander play perhaps as well. Gold Forge Sentinel. So this card, if you played with it in the past in the Theros block, it's just kind of one of those limited cards that you don't really want to play, but sometimes you don't have enough flyers or enough evasions, so you put it in your deck, and it's okay. It's not always going to make your cut, but it's there if you need it. Guardian Automation. So nothing super exciting here, but it's still a 3/3 for 4, which is fine and limited. I mean, the bonus of gaining 3 life is what it is, but 4 for 3/3, if you're desperate for playables, it's not the worst thing. Guardians of Meletis. Yeah, this is really to slow down your opponent if you have a more controlling strategy. It's a very niche role and limited. If you are trying to play a strong tempo game, maybe you throw one of these in your deck. Other than that, you're probably going to skip it. Hangerback Walker. So this is a good card, especially if you have a lot of mana available to you. Even if you don't, it's still decent because you can pump it up as you go. And it's just really hard to deal with. I mean, board sweeps, even spot removal. It's just going to turn this thing into a bunch of Thopters, which is going to be annoying for your opponent. So this is a really good card. You'll play this whether you're playing the Thopter strategy or not. It gets better with cards that will let you get more mana quickly. But even if you just have a normal strategy, this will be just fine for you. Even if this thing comes into play, even as a 1/1 or 2/2, you can spend time powering it up. It's not too much of a mana commitment. Helm of the Gods. And obviously this is tailor-made for an enchantment theme. In limited, if you have a lot of enchantments, this is going to be a really fine card for you. It's really cheap equipment in that case. It's cheap enough to maybe see play in the standard, maybe a 1 of or 2 of in a devotion deck. It would be interesting to see if it makes it there. Definitely Commander. Commander, I think, is where this card could really shine. Mayday Tome. So this is a little expensive. I mean, drawing cards is good, but this has been a classic card from the beginning of Magic, and it sometimes, probably most of the time, doesn't make your cut. But, you know, in the late game, it's a nice little mana sink, helps you get some card advantage. So if you're in it for the long game, I'm not saying it's a horrible choice to play this in limited, but it's not always going to make your cut. Mage Ring Responder. And this is an interesting card. I like the synergies with the 7 here. Cost 7 for a 7/7, cost 7 to untap it, and whenever it attacks, it deals 7 to target defending player's creature. So this is really strong. I mean, 7 is affordable and limited. This is a really good limited card. 7 to untap it can be a little annoying, but at the same time, it's going to be worth it because it's removal every time it attacks, and it's a big creature coming in. I mean, your opponent's probably losing 2 creatures every time you attack with it. So even though you're maybe taking the turn off to untap it, you're still getting value there. Really good card. As far as other formats go, I like to see someone play as a commander with some tricks to maybe untap artifacts. I think that would be kind of neat. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's just a limited card. Meteorite. This sees limited play. I mean, it's not super exciting at the 5 slots, but it does 2 damage, so it can work as removal for you, and you do get color fixing out of it too, which is nice. I played this quite a bit. You're never super excited to put in your deck, but it's a good staple. Orbs of Warding. So 5 to give yourself hexproof, and if a creature would deal damage to you, you get to prevent one of those damage. Yeah, that's good. 5's a little expensive for the effect, I think. Now, if you're playing a limited game and you're up against a lot of direct damage, it's worth siding in. If burn becomes a thing in Standard, and it looks like it probably will, maybe to see some sideboard play in Standard just to kind of keep those decks into check. Prism Ring. So traditionally in the core set, there's been a cycle of 5 cards, and they've changed over the years, that have something to do with when you play a spell of a certain color or a land of a certain type, or if your opponent does, you gain a life. So they basically took that concept, rolled it into one card, and there it is. These are kind of new player, I don't want to say traps, but they're cards that new players usually like because they like life gain. They are kind of a trap. You don't want to really play this in limited. It's something that is probably a fun card for some players, especially if they're new to the game, and that's why they like to include it, but it's not a very powerful effect. Pyromancer's Goggles. So this is a powerful effect. It costs 5. This is going to be really awesome in Commander, I think. As far as Constructed goes, I don't know. Could this make it into like a standard burn deck? Maybe a one-of in your deck just to kind of help power some extra damage across later in the game. I don't know. It's very interesting. It would be kind of fun to see what happens with this card, but you know, definitely a great commander card. As far as limited goes, yeah, it's good enough in limited if you have enough red instants and sorceries. If you don't, obviously you don't want to touch it. You want to make sure you get some sort of value out of this. Ramroller. So this is a good card if you can guarantee yourself you're going to have an artifact in play. So if you're playing a strong artifact theme, playing Thopters, then this is a good include. If you can't guarantee that, you don't even want to touch this card. You don't want a 2/3 for 3 that has to attack. 4/3 for 3 that has to attack is a little better. Not super amazing, but it is definitely a better situation. Rune Servitor. So this is a good card. 2 for 2/2, and when it dies, each player draws a card. It's better in the artifact deck if you have some ways to pump it and stuff, but for the most part, the only word of warning I'd say about this card is kind of know your opponent's deck. Sometimes your opponent may have, I don't know, 1 or 2 bombs that are just like game winning. If that's the case, you may want to side this out or not side it in, because if you feel like a card draw for your opponent is going to be more dangerous than a card draw for you, you don't want to play this. Now, if you have a big bomb you want to get to that's going to be basically game winning, well, that's a little different than you want to play this card. Sigil of Valor. So this is cheap equipment, costs 2, only 1 to equip, and it's kind of a nice thing if you have maybe a lot of small creatures, but only 1 or 2 with evasion. It can help get a lot of that damage across. So, for example, if you're playing maybe a white weenie theme and you have a flyer, you throw this on the flyer in the late game and you can get in there for lethal. This is not a bad card in the right deck. You probably want to be playing a lot of small creatures though for it to be really valuable for you, but it's a fine limited card. It's cheap enough that it's worth the risk, I think. Sword of Animus. So this makes any creature basically a mini Primeval Titan, and that's pretty cool. So it's also relatively cheap to equip. Yeah, it's going to help you ramp, so it's going to be a great limited card. I would certainly play this in limited just to get some land advantage. As far as constructed formats, I don't know. There might be a place. I mean, obviously, Primeval Titan is better at doing this, but this is cheaper, and there might be a place for this in a standard ramp deck at some point. But yeah, it's an interesting card. Also, could see some play in Commander where you can search up some lands that are really more like spells. Throwing Knife. These cards that can kind of sack themselves for direct damage usually are a lot better than you think they are. I would play this in Limited. I think it will just do fine. Sometimes it's nice to be able to take out a 2/2. It's a little annoying that you have to attack with it to get the effect. It'd be nice if you could just sack it or tap the creature and sack it. But yeah, I think it's good enough to be okay in Limited. Veteran Sidearm. This one's not super exciting. I mean, it's cheap, 2 and 1 to equip, but you get +1/+1. I can't really think of a time when I'm going to feel like this is worth a slot in my limited deck. This is just a good kind of way to teach new players how equipment works. Warhorn. Now this is really good in like white weenie decks, elf decks, maybe even a goblin strategy in limited, but really in limited. It only costs 3. I think no matter what, as long as you're playing a decent amount of creatures, which you probably are in limited, I think this is worth including in your deck, at least with a 1 of. This can get kind of powerful, and the more creatures you have, and if they have evasion, this can get kind of crazy. This is good enough even, I think, to see some standard play if there is a elf or goblin deck out there. You know, maybe it's a 1 of or 2 of in that deck. But yeah, very interesting card. I could even see some commander play in certain decks with, you know, a lot of small creatures. So let's move on to the lands, and the first thing you'll notice is the enemy pain lands are back, and here's Battlefield Forge. So these are just a great staple. They're going to be great for you in standard. Now, obviously, when you get into the other formats like modern, I mean, sometimes you see some of these in modern, but for the most part, you know, you have things like fetch lands and you have shock lands, and there's sometimes better options. But this is going to be great in standard. These are going to be great for you in limited if you're on these colors, especially if you have some of the gold cards, just to help your consistency. So yeah, they are back, and you'll be happy that they're back. And here's the white-black one, Caves of Colorless. Evolving Wilds is also back, and this is great color fixing for you. It's just going to help keep your color smooth, especially if you're splashing for a third color. These will be great for you. If you're just playing a straight-up dual color deck, probably unnecessary, but it does thin the land out of your deck, and if you're playing a third color, it's fantastic for you. Foundry of the Consuls, you want to think of this more as a spell than a land, and you got to look at it this way. Would you pay 5 to get 2 1/1 Thopter tokens that can't be countered? Because that's basically what this is. Doesn't seem super economical, but if you're in that Thopter deck and you need Thopters, this is probably okay in that deck, and in that case you can probably play it. In most other cases, I don't know if it's quite worth it. And here's Llanowar Wastes. Majoring Network. So this land is okay if you have any X spells in your deck. So if you have a couple X spells, it might be worth running in limited. Other than that, it's probably not going to do a whole lot for you. I mean, it's a mana battery. Maybe if you have big creatures, it will help with your ramp in the late game. So it might have some value there. But for the most part, this will be helpful with X spells. Rogue's Passage. And this card can actually be pretty decent, considering there's a lot of big creatures, especially in green, that don't have evasion. So again, you might want to think of this as a spell in certain decks. But for the most part, if you're playing 2 colors, this will be fine being one of your lands in the land count, I think. But yeah, it has a pretty decent effect for 4. Can help you get across with a creature that normally wouldn't be able to get across. And here's the blue-red pain land, Siobhan Reef. And finally, we have Yavimaya Coast, which is green and blue. So, having said that, we did it. We got through the entire Magic Origins set. So again, just want to thank everybody for joining the channel. If you joined, want to thank the longtime subscribers as well. Really appreciate all of your support. And now that we got through the set review, and we had a pretty intense spoiler season, I actually had some videos I've already recorded a while ago that I thought I'd be able to put up on the channel. So I will be putting up those this week. Do have a couple pack openings, and this weekend I do want to do another finance video as well, since we weren't able to do one last week. And on top of that, we're getting close to 500 subscribers. So for our 500 subscriber celebration, I have a box of Modern Masters 2015 that we're going to be opening. So a lot of stuff coming up, and before you know it, we'll be talking about Battle for Zendikar. So, hey, thanks for always watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. If you're still looking for quality Magic the Gathering videos, click on one of these annotations. And if you hadn't had a chance yet to subscribe, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the breaking MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, crazy product openings, or gameplay videos on Heroes and Legends MTG. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.